Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a very late January wrap-up. So I am filming this on February 18th because this month has totally flown by. I mean this whole year, month and a half, whatever, has flown by. If you didn't see my last video, maybe 2 videos ago, because I think I have something else going up before this, I announced officially that I am pregnant. I'm currently in my 2nd trimester, so finally starting to get some of my energy back and starting to feel a little more myself, but I've just totally not been in the booktube headspace for basically since the end of December. I do really miss making videos and reading and talking to you guys though, so hopefully I can get back into the swing of things. And one of the things I needed to do to try and get myself back on track is tell you what I read in January. I definitely didn't read a whole lot in January. I also don't think my February wrap-up will be very big because, like I said, it is February 18th, and I haven't finished anything yet this month, but we're not here to talk about February yet. I still have a little over a week to finish up a few things and maybe start and finish a couple things. That's probably being a little too optimistic. Anyways, back to January. As far as my ratings for the month, this is how my ratings panned out. I'm okay with these ratings. They weren't terrible. I had 1 3-star book and 2 4-star books. I almost always have at least 1 5-star book in a month, so that's a little bit disappointing, but I only finished 3 things, so it's not too surprising that there wasn't a 5-star in there. Also, all 3 of the books that I read were technically series starters, but basically only one of these series I know I will be continuing in, so I didn't really add too much to my overall series counter. Okay, so these are the 3 books that I read in January. And if you're only interested in hearing my thoughts on some of them, feel free to check out the timestamps down below and jump to the books that you're interested in. In my monthly wrap-ups, I always talk about the books in the order that I read them. So the very first book that I read and finished in January was The Rosie Project by Graeme Simsion. I was reading this for my work book club. It is definitely not something that I would typically pick up. It's a contemporary romance, but it was nominated for my work book club and won our poll. I think probably because the main character is a geneticist and the plot is kind of centered around him trying to help this woman who ends up being the love interest, trying to help her find her biological father. I had a lot of fun with this one. As you can see, I gave it 4 stars. It was just like a jolly good time. Definitely not a new favorite or anything, but I enjoyed my time reading it. It made me laugh a lot, and there were a few times when I was reading it that I couldn't put it down because I just needed to know what was going to happen next. This is the start of a series. I don't think I'm going to continue on in the series, but who knows, maybe I'll pick up the next one. They're kind of standalones anyways. But I definitely feel like I got Toby, stop it. But I definitely feel like I got a full story, and I don't know if I loved the characters enough that I really need to know what's gonna happen next. Anyways, the main character, his name is Don Tillman, and one thing that's interesting about this book is that he has Asperger's. He's on the spectrum. He doesn't really label himself throughout the book, and that was a point of discussion in our book club, was whether or not he realized he has Asperger's. I mean, I think he does, but he just doesn't really label himself in the book. But because he is on the spectrum, he's had a bit of a hard time with romance, and the book starts out with him starting the Wife Project, which is him trying to find a suitable partner for himself. And he has all these criteria. He's going on dating sites and sending people these questionnaires for them to fill out and things like that. And then towards the beginning of the book, he meets this woman named Rosie, and she immediately to him does not fit his criteria, and he thinks that she is not suitable to be a partner for him. But he finds out that she is wanting to find her biological father. Don is a genetics professor and decides that he's going to try and help Rosie to figure out who her biological dad is, and that's where the story starts. Like I said, I thought this one was just a lot of fun. There were a few things about Don that I found a little frustrating, but I think all of it really kind of goes back to him being on the spectrum and some of his characteristics. But I really like the overall message of the book. I was worried that the romance was going to be about Don trying to change himself to become someone different, to be able to fit into a relationship with someone, but that's not where the romance went at all, and so I really enjoyed the way that it ended. I will say that I guessed who Rosie's dad was pretty early on, like halfway through the book, but you don't really find out for sure until the very end, and it was kind of like a fun little twist and turn. Like, I guessed who it was, but I was still kind of on my toes thinking maybe I was wrong a few times because there were a bunch of red herrings and stuff, so that little mystery bit was kind of fun. And I just thought Don was hilarious as a character, and the book made me laugh a lot, and I had a lot of fun with it. Just a really good time, even though this book isn't the type of book that I would typically read. So if you guys are in the mood to pick up like kind of like a rom-com book about a guy who is on the spectrum looking for love, and there's a little bit of genetics thrown in, then I would recommend this one. I thought it was fun. The next book that I finished in January was 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray, which is the first book in the Firebird trilogy, which I also gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is a YA book. It's a science fiction book. I would actually classify it as sci-fi thriller because it definitely had me on the edge of my seat. It was a bit of a page turner. I thought it was pretty thrillery, and I actually was reading this for my Patreon book club. So if you didn't hear, I recently, like at the beginning of the year, started a Patreon book club, and this was our pick for January, or maybe I should say my pick because I picked the first 2 books myself, even though the rest of the books that we read for book club will be picked by my patrons. Most people who read it enjoyed it, which made me feel really good. So this YA book was written like in 2014, 2015, so it does kind of feel like an, you know, older YA book that was written in 2014 or 15. But at the same time, there were some things about it that I thought were ahead of its time. Okay, so let me just say what it's about. The main character in this book is Marguerite, or Maggie, and at the very beginning of the book, it starts with her father having been murdered, and her and another main character are going to travel to different like alternate dimensions. So that's the sci-fi element of this book, is that they are traveling between dimensions to try and catch the guy that killed her father. So one of the things that I really loved about this book were the various alternate dimensions. I love alternate dimension books anyways, and I just always love seeing like what things are different and what things are the same. And one thing that was really cool that I didn't expect from this book is that the other alternate dimensions almost gave the book like a genre bending quality, because some of them like made the book feel like they were in a different genre. So there was one that was like a super futuristic science fiction setting. There was one that was like a historical fiction setting, which I thought was really cool. There was one that was kind of like dystopian-esque because it was like semi-post-apocalyptic. That was really cool. I really liked the different worlds. It was just really cool to see like different iterations of our world if things had happened differently in our past. I will say that the romance, it's kind of romance heavy. There is a love triangle. It's pretty angsty, but it wasn't so angsty that it totally turned me off. Like, it was a little more angsty than my typical taste, but I still really enjoyed it. But a couple of the things that I thought were kind of ahead of its time, considering when this book was written, were the fact that Marguerite, gets her period in one of these alternate universes and has to like figure out how to handle that. And I feel like periods aren't often like part of the plot in books, and that's something that I think is like really realistic and really refreshing to see, so that was something that I enjoyed. And also, there is a sex scene in this book. It's not explicit, but it also doesn't fade to black. Like, it's very clear what is happening, and it's kind of like discussed. And I feel like YA from, 2014, 2015 time period was still doing a lot. I mean, it still happens in YA written today, where they just kind of like fade to black, and you're like, do they have sex? Do they not? Like, I don't really know what happened. And this book didn't do that, which I also found refreshing and I appreciated. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was so much fun. It was such a page turner. I read it kind of quickly. I listened to the audiobook. So I had this on audiobook as well as having a physical copy out from my library. The audiobook I believe I had out from my library. I thought the audiobook was really good because the narrator, she had to give the characters like various accents depending on what universe they were in based on like their location. And I was just like really impressed that she was able to do that. And it was really good at like kind of reminding me of where the characters were. And I just know that if I had read it only physically, like I wouldn't have been giving the characters different accents when I was, you know, reading in my head. So I really appreciated that aspect of the audiobook. So I definitely like the audiobook, and if it's the same narrator for the others, I might continue to listen to them. Okay, the third and final thing that I read in January was City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. It was my most disappointing read of January. I mean, I thought it was all right. I was disappointed because I thought I was really gonna like it. I've heard so much about Robert Jackson Bennett's Foundryside series, which I haven't read yet, and I'd heard some good things about this one too. It's definitely not as widely talked about as Foundryside, but I heard good things about it. Like I've heard Reagan from Peru's Projects talk about it, and I think it's like described as like a geopolitical fantasy, which I wasn't really sure what that meant. Now I'm not so sure that geopolitical fantasy is something that I really like. Anyways, it's an adult fantasy book. It's kind of a strange one. Like there is a lot of politics, but it's very much like government type of politics, not like royalty kind of politics. And I'm starting to think that maybe I have a preference for like royalty politics and like court politics and maybe not this other kind of politics. I don't know. This is a fantasy, but it also doesn't feel very fantasy. Like it doesn't have a historical fantasy feel. The opener of the book, it starts out like in a court setting with like lawyers and stuff and a case. It actually has like this whole like murder mystery plot line going on, which I was not expecting. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of A Memory Called Empire, which is a science fiction book that I read last year, one that I also gave 3 stars. And for some reason, these books like really remind me of each other. And at first I was thinking that I was a little bit out there in making that connection, but actually I've seen a ton of other people also say that if you liked A Memory Called Empire, you might like this one. I went the opposite way, obviously. Like I didn't really like A Memory Called Empire, and I also didn't really like City of Stairs. I did think the city was like really cool, and the magic was interesting. There's like these gods, and it's a very like open magic system, and it's not very structured and things, which I think is maybe a little bit why I didn't like it. The book had some ups and downs. Like it was a slow start for me, and then about a quarter of the way through I got like really interested in what was going on, but I never totally fell in love, and then it kind of went back downhill towards the end, and the final like climax and stuff, I was just like, I don't really care about what's going on now. So that's why I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't as good as I had hoped. I know a lot of people still really enjoyed this. I read this for the Shelf Space Book Club book for January, and I did attend the live stream. So it was kind of cool to see, you know, why some people really liked it, and there were other people who were more like on my side of the fence and didn't like some of the same things that I did, or had pretty like lukewarm feelings about it. So I'll link the Shelf Space live stream down below if you guys have read this book, or even if you haven't, there's a spoiler-free section of the live stream before we get into spoilers and stuff. But yeah, this one ended up being a little bit disappointing because I thought I was really gonna like it, and it ended up being pretty lukewarm for me. I still plan to read Foundryside. I think that Foundryside is very different from this book, and I still want to read it, even though I didn't have the best experience with City of Stairs, but I'm definitely not going to continue on in the City of Stairs series. Alright guys, those are the 3 books I read in January. Let me know down below if you have read these books and what you thought of them, or let me know what your favorite book that you read in January was. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.